Hey, Last Boy Scouts, it's Reed the Beard. Next episode, we talked early in one of our episodes, we were going to bring out Brandon Craig. He has a very unusual skill set, really neat skill set we want to share with you guys. And so that's what we're here to do today. Brandon, explain to us a little bit about what your skill set is and how it ties into what we do with the Last Boy Scouts.
Well, it's something I picked up a couple years back, just kind of experimenting, was making knives. I've always had trouble buying stuff that I could make or paying somebody to do something for me that I could do. So when I started getting into knives, shoot, I've always been into knives as a kid, but as I got older and gained a lot more skills with being in metal shops and stuff, I got over 20 years of metal fabrication in my background. It was time for me to start doing something cool, I guess you could say. So got into making knives, experimented with it. I kind of was out of the knife light for the last few years while I got a new job and kind of got going into that. And then I decided, well, I'd get back into making my knives again. And I kind of followed that rabbit way into its hole and kept chasing it. And now it's kind of consumed me now. So that's kind of my biggest hobby is knife making now. So, which is something I plan on doing, maybe working towards a retirement business possibly too.
Outstanding. So we kind of tasked Brandon with coming up with a bushcraft style knife. I think he's met the challenge, and today we're going to go through that process from raw piece of metal all the way to a finished product. So stick around. It's going to be a good one.
Here we're starting with a farrier's rasp to make these bushcraft / camp knives that we're doing. Found these farrier's rasps kind of leave a neat pattern. Both sides are different, which kind of makes it a little bit complicated to grind, but the finished product I think looks really cool. So
what a farrier?
It's a farrier's rasp. So horseshoers use these rasps for shaping the horse's hooves when they go to horseshoe them.
Oh, okay.
So
basically, essentially, it's a file.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Because for me, I don't know nothing about that. I didn't grow up doing anything with FFA or with horses or anything, but that is a big ass file and it looks awesome. So for your step one, taking your metal stock, what do you got going on here?
So what I did here is I laid a pattern out that we're going to be using for that particular knife shape, and then I spray it with some white spray paint. Gives me a good outline, so when I go to cut it out, I know where I'm cutting it. The contrast from the dark blade to the white paint stands out, makes it easier for my eyes to see. So I'm using a pair of pliers here. Take these off so I don't get paint all over my hands right now, because this paint's still pretty wet. And then when I go to pull the pattern off, that's what she looks like there.
Wow, very cool. Now, what type of blade angle is this? I know with blades, bladesmiths, blade making, they have a different type of name for their different types of blades. What type of blade is this?
The grind that we're going to be doing on this is a Scandi grind. It's going to be a one grind edge on this blade. So a lot of knives, like some of these here, I have a convex grind, so it's a rounded grind all the way to the point. They're pretty sturdy points. But what we're going to be doing here is I'm going to be setting it in a jig so I have one constant edge from the tip of the blade all the way out. Most knives, a pocket knife I have here, they have a main grind and then they have a secondary grind. The secondary grind is what get sharpened on a lot of knives.
So what's the next step in your process after you've put your pattern down? What where do you go from there?
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw this in the vise, and I've got a 4.5-inch cutoff wheel on a angle grinder that I'm going to be cutting this pattern out with. And then once the pattern is cut out, then I'll come over, fire up the forge, and we'll throw it in the forge, get it annealed, which is softening the steel so I can do any kind of file work or drill press work or anything like that. Because right now, this steel is really hard. Files are hard, they're tool steel. So it's very hard unless you have special drill bits like a cobalt drill bit. And right now I don't have any of those bits to use on that. So I'm using standard drill bits. Now I've got to take this steel and soften it so I can use a file and actually file work it and use a drill press on it. So the annealing process is the softening of the steel so it can easily be worked.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'll let you go ahead and get that in the vise. I'm gonna get the hell out of your way because I know utilizing equipment like that, you're gonna be throwing sparks everywhere.
Sparks are gonna fly.
Bottom line is I don't feel like getting a spark shower today. So go ahead and I'll let you go ahead and get into that process.
Okay. Then I lose my line, so I go through and etch everything real quick around the line, and then go back and cut it all out.
So Brandon, can you tell our viewing audience what items you should always be wearing or have with you when you're using power tools and very dangerous object?
Yes, power tools. One thing you don't want to do is wear gloves. I'm wearing gloves because this metal's getting hot. I've got to catch it. So yeah, I'm having to sacrifice a few things. The reason why you don't want to wear gloves when you're running power tools, you can't feel the wind of the blade. So when you're wearing gloves, and you can do what I just did, is the blade goes into your thumb. So I just caught a pretty good little spot in my thumb with the cutoff wheel. So, but outside of that, safety glasses, probably want to wear a face shield. I don't like wearing face shields, so I'm not going to wear one. But, and you want to make sure you got your proper guards. You can't see the guards I got on it because it's invisible, but you want to make sure you have your guards on your grinders for safety purposes.
Okay, so now you got your basic shape ground out and it's been cut out. Where do you go from here? Is it just basic cleanup, or is there anything else you need to do first?
So pretty much cleanup right now. So I'm gonna go over to the pedestal grinder and get these edges ground out nice. So when I hit it with the belt grinder, I'm not chewing up belts, and it's taking a lot less belt to do the work. So I'll hit the pedestal grinder, clean up these inside grooves, get the end of the handle rounded off nice, and once I'm done there, then I'll shoot over to the forge. We'll fire up the forge, get it going. In fact, what I think I'm going to go ahead and do, because it takes a minute for the forge to heat up, is I think I'm going to go ahead and fire up the forge now.
Okay.
While we're hitting our grinds there, because it won't take too much longer on the pedestal grinder.
Okay.
So I'll hit the pedestal grinder, and then by that time, the forge should be hot enough to...
Time-wise, about how long does it take your forge to heat up before you can throw your metal in?
You know, I would like to say anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, kind of gets it nice and heated up, because if not, my metal's just sitting in there, sitting before it really starts heating up good.
So you want to get that up to temperature before you throw it in.
Yeah, then it's quicker for the blade to heat up and do what we have to do for the that process. Because right now the steel's still pretty hard, so it'll be working any tool that hits it right now. So once we do there, then we'll be able to anneal it and get it all softened up.
Outstanding. Well, we'll get out of your way and let you get through that.
Okay. Bucket as I'm dumping it, keep it from getting too hot to burn my hands. If I can feel it through the glove, it's pretty hot, so I'm trying to keep the heat down as much as I can, so it's a little more comfortable to grind.
So you've already cut it to shape. We've cleaned up all our edges. Now, are we ready to put it in the forge yet, or is there
one step I forgot to mention that we need to do is I need to go ahead and grind the rough surface of this file down to where we just get our triangular pattern going. Because right now, I'm afraid that if we were to heat it up the way this is, it might warp because it's uneven from this side to this side. Because you have the file side, and then you have your farrier's rasp side for grinding filing out the hooves of the horse. So what I need to do is I need to get that flat all the way down to the flat stock of the file, so it's easier to work with down the road.
All right. Take a few minutes today, being that it's 9/11. Sorry, it's for those of us who remember that day 20 years ago. It affected all of us in a way that I don't think we could have ever imagined. And we want to thank all the first responders, firemen, and our military for everything they've done over the last 20 years. I get a little choked up. It's an emotional issue for me because I remember that morning Do you remember what you were doing that morning, Brandon?
Yeah, I was a freshman in high school, actually, waking up to my parents kind of hollering around the house, wondering what the heck was going on. Turned on the news to see that, and seeing the towers fall right as we were getting up, turning on the TV, hearing the Pentagon got bombed. That was the first thing that I had heard, and I remember it like it was yesterday. And watching that, turning on that, seeing the evil that is in the hearts of some pretty bad people, and that right there was the wake up moment to the world not being as peaceful as I grew up for it to be. Before I got into law enforcement where I am now, I was a fireman with the Tulare County Fire Department for approximately 6 years with them. And last year I was an engineer, EMT for the last 4 years. And that was a big staple in the fire service when I was with the fire service with them. Every year, 9/11, it was, just like it had happened every year. And to think that was 20 years ago is just crazy to think about. And to see everything going on in Afghanistan right now with us pulling out. I've never done military time. I've got the utmost respect for everybody that has worn a uniform regardless of which branch it was in. I got some really good friends that were over there in Afghanistan and Iraq. Got some really good friends of mine that had to medically retire because they were injured to the point that they could no longer operate at their duties over there in Afghanistan. And I went to school with a couple of guys that have actually been killed in Afghanistan and those surrounding areas fighting this cause against terrorism. And with everything going on right now and us pulling out, again, I'm no specialist when it comes to military training or anything like that, other than just my training in law enforcement and the side of that. But I kind of think we pulled out a little too early and didn't have our ducks in a row when we did, and it's kind of ended up where we're at today.
Scott, you?
Like Brandon, I was in high school at the time, showing my age. I was a senior in high school, and I remember waking up, walking out into the living room and seeing my mom crying. The first plane had already hit the tower, and my mom's a very emotional person to begin with, but I was standing there watching the TV with her as the second plane hit the tower, and I saw everything live on TV. And I remember the chills that I felt, and I know that was just God speaking to my soul for the agony that his children just experienced. It saddens me to no end to know how many people lost their lives over something so senseless, and I will never forget, and it was always impacted me. And moving on in my life, later on when I achieved the rank of Eagle Scout, as part of my Court of Honor, one of the individuals that spoke at my Court of Honor was in the military, was a naval aviator, and he led the first strike after 9/11. And he gave me a token to remember that experience, to remember my Eagle Court of Honor, and to remember how awesome our great country is and how much freedom costs, not just for us here, but for all those all over the world, and how we must not only fight to preserve it for us, but for others to enjoy as well. And this is a challenge coin that he gave me, that he carried with him as they dropped those first bombs to pay back the individuals that took all those lives on 9/11. And I will never forget.
Difficult day for me. Knowing that a lot of very close friends were going to be going into battle. And many of those friends did not come back. So it's an emotional thing for me. But I want to thank everybody who stepped up and did their duty and served a great nation and a grateful nation. So we ask you who are watching the video, even though you won't be watching it on 9/11, please take a moment of silence and remember all those who've sacrificed for this nation so that knuckleheads like us can do stuff like this, because without that we wouldn't have that freedom. So we just wanted to take a moment today and speak about that a little bit, and where we were and what the impact has been on our life. So on a brighter note, we'll get back to Brandon cutting on some knives and getting through this process, but we could not let this day go past without stepping up and saying something and thanking all of those who stepped forward and did their duty.
All right, Brennan, so how long is this going to take to heat up?
You know, I really can't say that there's a certain time frame for how long it takes to heat it up. One thing I go by is a non-magnetic state with the steel. So what I'll do is I'll use this magnet here and probe the steel. It's going to be a pretty bright orange, pretty much like that brick that's in there. It'll be about as orange as that brick. But what I'll do is I'll heat it up, get it to the point where it's at its non-magnetic state, let it soak in that heat just a little bit, and then I'll throw it in the ash pit. And what this is going to do, wood ash is a very good insulator. So what it's going to do is it's going to allow that blade to slowly cool. And what happens with that is the quicker a blade cools, the harder that metal is going to get. Well, if you allow that steel to cool on a lot slower level, it'll stay softer. So then that's the whole goal with what we're trying to do now. But later on, we'll end up heating it up and quenching it and showing the whole hardening process of it.
Awesome.
So what I like doing here, I got both burners on, and I try to get this metal to move around, because if not, I'll show you what it does if you don't move it around. You end up with a hot spot, just one spot that's heating up. So you gotta continually keep this thing moving to get it heated up evenly. Not really so dire need of doing that right now, but when you get into the hardening stage of it to get it quenched, you really want a nice even heat treat, or it'll warp when you go to quench it.
But yeah, I was going to ask you, Brendan, if you get that metal too hot, what could happen?
You can pretty much destroy the steel. It'll get to the point where that steel is so brittle you can never do anything with it, and you're redoing everything. So you really don't want to get it too hot. You're going to start running into that when it starts turning yellow. So hot that you're welding at that point.
Oh wow.
With what we're doing, we really don't want to get it that far. We're not welding, we're just heating it up to soften it up. And really, right now, the biggest part that I want to make sure softens up is the handle, because that's where we're going to be drilling our holes and doing our file work, right in the ricasso. And I'll explain where the ricasso is later on. But
I was about to say, he's speaking Italian to me now?
So I don't know if you can see it. I'll go ahead and talk about it now. But the ricasso is the area, I'll be able to better explain it later, but it's the area between your blade edge and the handle. So the ricasso is going to be right in here. So I definitely want the ricasso softened up so I can file this in here and then drill my holes for my handle pins. sticking to it anywhere. So I know that it's at its non-magnetic state. So what I want to do is I want to throw it back in, make sure everything is evenly heated up. So we'll throw it back in for another minute. It's going to heat up pretty quick. So I'll pull it back out. We'll go straight to the ash tank with it. I'll go through and check it again. And now it's going into the ash. Throw that there. That's going to sit until it completely cools to where you can go in, grab it with your hand and pull it out. So that right there, that could take hours depending. What I'll do is I'll feel the side of it, see once that tank is nice and cool, then I'll stick my hand in and see what the temperature is on it, and then once it completely cools to room temperature, then we'll pull it out and we can start working it.
So it's been several hours. Our blade has cooled off in the ash now. You're ready now. At this point, you're ready to pull it out, and then where do you go from there?
So I'm going to pull the blade out. I'm going to run it on the belt sander to surface the outside of it, kind of mellow out the grinding marks from the grinder on the both faces of that blade. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to chuck it up into my jig, my bevel grinding jig, and start grinding the bevels down on the belt.
What exactly are the bevels?
So the bevel is the angle of the blade.
Okay.
Or what I would call the angle of the blade. There's probably a term for it, but it's the pitch from the very tip of the blade out. Since we're doing a Scandi grind, we're only having a primary grind on it. So there's only going to be one grind from the tip of the blade out.
Okay.
So we're not doing a secondary sharpening grind. It's just one grind.
And the Scandi grind, it's a Scandinavian grind, correct?
Correct. Correct.
And so typically a lot of the knives made in Scandinavia, as far as their bushcrafting, hunting, a lot of their fishing knives, they have that specific type of grind on it. It's actually a very versatile type grind.
Correct.
And it makes it easier to sharpen only because it's one solid grind instead of having those secondary grinds.
Right. And it's a very diverse grind. You go from skinning something to gutting an animal if you're out hunting to using it for fishing and skinning fish too. Yeah. So it's been a pretty good blade.
Okay. I'll let you go ahead and pull that out and we'll get it on the grinder.
So what I'll do here, it's full of wood ash. I'll come in and get that all cleaned off. If I push too hard, it stops the motor, so you don't want to push real hard on this steel.
We show here real quick. You can see where it's really starting to come. You're getting more level with this area down here. Is what you're talking about.
Correct.
I can still feel and how rough it is down here, but this end right here, it seems like it's smoothing out a lot more.
Right. And what it's going to do is it's going to flatten out where it's just going to give us this triangle pattern. I think it's a really neat pattern whenever everything's all sanded flat and smooth.
So we're all done with the grinder for the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and you've gotten everything kind of smoothed out. So what's next step in your process?
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to coat this edge with a blue Sharpie. I found it's the easiest thing to use. A lot of people actually go get an edge coating and a coating they paint the blade with. I found that just a big Sharpie like this is plenty for what I need to do. And what I'm going to do here is I coat the edge, and then I found what works good with these, just out of trial and error, is one of these drill bits right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this on the anvil. I'm going to take the center part of that drill bit, and it's the same thickness as the blade, and I'm going to etch a center line on one side, flip the blade over, and then etch another one. And what that's going to do is that's going to give me a finished grind that I want before it's heat treated to harden back up.
Okay.
So I never like to take a grind all the way down, because whenever you heat treat a blade, I can't think of what the term is for it, but it's almost like scale.
Okay.
It scales the blade to where you're having to take off metal to get all of that off.
Okay.
So by the time, if you leave a little bit, which is a hair thinner than a dime thickness, you can take it out, get all that knocked down, and you still have a nice safe edge to work with, and you just keep grinding it down a little bit farther from there. So what I'm going to be putting a new belt on the grinder and start my I'm going to get it thrown in a bevel grinder once I get this edged, and I'll throw it in the bevel grinder, and
that's the jig you're talking
and
about.
that's the jig, sorry. So I'll throw it in the bevel jig, and right now it's at 90 degrees, and I've got my table on my grinder set at 6 degrees.
Okay.
So when it's all said and done, my edge is going to have a 12-degree edge on it. So 6 degrees on one side, 6 degrees on the other. So
well, I have to warn you here with Last Boy Scouts, we're not real good at math, but I'm glad you've already got it figured out.
I'm not real great at math either. I just know small numbers are easy to add up.
Yeah.
You know, 6 and 6 makes 12. So luckily, that was kind of right up my alley when it comes to math in school. So
well, as long as we have those same amount of fingers and toes, we can count to that.
If I have to, I'll pull my shoes off and count my toes on my feet.
Well, let me go ahead and etch that
Okay.
and get it in your jig, and we can go from there.
Okay.
Hit that like button, share it, and subscribe. And when you do, make sure you hit that notification bell for any new videos that are coming out. That way you'll be notified when they hit. So for the Last Boy Scouts, as we always say, be safe, be vigilant, knowledge is your weapon, and be prepared.